Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Zach with an H. Very excited to introduce today's guest. He's the head of ALCA. He makes sure a certain platypus is doing what needs to be done, and you can find him surfing or storyboarding when he's not. Swampy Marsh, very excited to talk with you today. Thank you for taking the time.
Absolute pleasure. That's I guess that makes me Swampy with a Y.
Swampy with a Y, and maybe
Although I have had people spell it with an I, which even I'm like, with an I? Why would you spell it with an I? That's just weird.
Is it
Said the guy
IE?
who goes by the name Swampy.
No, is that an IE or just a plain I?
I've had IE, but the one I thought was the weirdest with an I, SWAMPI. And I'm like,
Yeah, it's not like
what is
Bobby.
that?
Like, Bobby or Ricky. I know they switched to the I, but okay. All right. Well, it's a great way to start. Always love diving into pronunciation. We are going to talk about the Swampy origin, folks, and why Jeff Swampy Marsh has the Swampy name. I'll let him tell you as we go. It's built in. Yeah. But Swampy, before we talk about your career and your journey, I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to talk about your nonprofit, A Walk on Water. So can you tell our listeners a bit more about it and its goals?
Well, I've been with Walk on Water, I think, over 11 years now. And we provide surf therapy for kids with special needs and their families. I'm a big surfer, and I got involved with them just because I was literally looking for a way to give back with my son, Django. And we wanted to do something together, and we both surf, and we thought we could find something. And at the time, he was going to a school that had a really amazing spectrum program. And we have found out through the years that Phineas and Ferb connects with a lot of kids on the spectrum in a really amazing way. So we thought, well, let's see if we can combine those two things. And I found A Walk on Water online. They just formed, and reached out to them, said we'd like to come volunteer. And we've been with them ever since. And it's one of the most amazing organizations. The effect of surf therapy on kids is just profound, and every event that we go to is a wonderfully incredible emotional roller coaster. I've had parents come up to me and say, "I just had the first conversation I had with my nonverbal child." Things that just really get you in an emotional way, and could not be more grateful to have been involved with them for all these years. Go take a look at them, www.awalkonwater.org. You don't have to be a surfer to volunteer. You definitely don't have to be a surfer to donate. But if you're anywhere near one of our events, East and West Coast, please come out, even if it's just to cheer the athletes on as they surf.
All right, so Thank you, Swampy. Make sure folks check out A Walk on Water. I wanted to lead with that because I know that it's certainly the most recent thing you've been up to, and certainly, as you may say in any other conversation, rep the most valuable, giving back and taking the time. So thank you. I wanted to start with that instead of finishing with that. So, and as I said, folks, we are going to get to the origin. So Jeff Swampy Marsh, originally born Jeff Dudman. So, yep. Swampy, how did the Marsh thing come about, and which college mate specifically made the Swampy suggestion? Because I know another guy said Boggy, but Swampy is the one.
I was not on board with it. Well, I was living and working in England back in 1980, which started as my buddy just saying, "Hey, we should go bum around Europe for 3 months." And another friend I was working with said, "Well, I'm from Exeter in England, and I was planning on taking a trip to go back and visit my mom. She'll put us up. We can go start there and stay for a week or two." So we went to Exeter, beautiful college town with a Roman wall around it and a Norman castle in the middle of the city. Just beautiful. And then my other friend who was supposed to be meeting us got delayed, and I ended up staying there for 9 months. Now, I never actually attended Exeter University. I did, however, live in the girls' dorms for a couple of weeks. they came to me after a couple of weeks. A very nice cleaning lady there came one morning and said, "They know you're here, darling. You'll have to go." And I went, "Oh," and she goes, "Yes, it's very sad. You should go now." So I packed up my bags and headed out and ended up getting a couple of jobs there. And I ended up living there for about a year. And I was working at a nightclub that's still there called the Timepiece Wine Bar and Discotheque. I've since become friends with the new owner and helped redesign their logo. You can go look them up online. And while I was there, somebody decided they were going to nickname me either Boggy Marsh or Swampy Marsh. And I had probably had one or two beers when I decided I was not happy about being called Boggy and made kind of a big deal out of it, maybe too big a deal, because the next evening I came into work and everybody was very clearly, "Hello, Swampy." And then my American friends found out about it, and I've been Swampy ever since.
Okay.
It could be worse.
It could definitely be worse. Honestly, there's Shrek kind of has his lore in his time in the swamp, but it seems like you've really, kind of become like the Swampy. Yeah, it's a full name, and also, right? I'm from what I maybe this is incorrect, maybe it's correct. From what I was also reading as getting ready for our conversation, was that you also wanted Swampy in your name because 15 letters gives you more characters than
that was actually the joke Dan made. And it originally wasn't true. It just I was going by Swampy, and when I was I didn't get into animation until I was 28. Before that, I was in the computer. I did a lot of things, but I'd ended up in the computer business, and I was actually a marketing executive. I used to work with Microsoft and Bill Gates and kind of this corporate guy. And I freaked out one day, just realized, oh my gosh, if I keep doing this, I'm going to wake up one day and be 64 like I am now and still be doing something I didn't care about. So I quit. But having the nickname Swampy when you're a marketing executive isn't very helpful. But once I got into animation, it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about hiding my nickname anymore. So I was filling out all my documentation with Swampy, and it was David Silverman, the supervising director, who's still the supervising director on The Simpsons, who looked at my paperwork and stuff, and he said, "Swampy, what's that?" And I went, "It's my nickname. I've had it for a long time. It's what everybody knows me by." He says, "I'm going to give you credit like that, like a threat." And I went, "No, it's fine. That's okay. It doesn't bother me." It's like, okay. So for the longest time, I was the only person who had a nickname in the credits. And he always said if I ever worked on one of the Halloween episodes where everybody gets a nickname, I would be the only one listed who didn't have a nickname. And then I never worked on a Halloween episode.
Well, actually, Swampy, another kind of Simpsons follow-up to kind of start. So I've been watching episodes on and off for about 22 years. Was that Sherry Shevapravadamrong? I've never tried to say the name out loud. I didn't practice. The one was that producer there when you were there? She's been there a long time.
The name sounds familiar, but there was a lot of folks. And back then in the early days, we were separate from all the writers and the producers. They were all at another building. Matt used to come around all the time, and we met him several times. He was a lovely dude. But we didn't really get to know the writers, except for occasionally we'd have a crew party or a Christmas party or something, and we'd get to see them.
And how did you first get involved with The Simpsons? And kind of a follow up, and I think you'll answer it together. And then what was your first interaction with Dan? Because I know that's where you guys first started your long history together.
Well, like I said, I quit my executive job and had no idea what I was going to do. And a friend of mine who was in animation said, "I've seen your work. You should get a job in animation." I thought, okay, that sounds great. How do I do that? And he spent the next 2 months helping me get a portfolio together. And what we focused on is I'd studied a lot of architecture and architectural rendering in high school. Those pretty drawings of what a building is going to look like. So I have really freakishly strong perspective skills. And he helped me put a portfolio together as a background layout artist, because we had a lot of background layout being done at that time. And at the end of that, some other friends of mine, funny enough, the real Ferb, because there is a real Ferb, and his wife, Melinda, had another friend, Debbie Silver, who was working on The Simpsons. And she had heard they were looking for background people. So I got a call saying, hey, I know where you can apply. And I went down and applied, had a meeting with David Silverman. He looked at my perspective and went, okay, you're hired. And so that was my first job in animation. We were over at the Klasky Chupo building in Hollywood. And I still remember the very first thing I ever drew was on season 2. The episode is Blood Feud. And I drew Otto's naked lady mud flaps. And we worked at that studio for a couple of seasons. And then the show transferred over to Film Roman. And when we moved over there, they sat me across the aisle from Dan Povenmire. And that's where we first met. We were like posing for each other for, you'd look over at somebody and say, hey, stand on one leg for me so I can draw that. And we just got to know each other and found out we had incredibly similar comedy chops and references and stuff that we loved. And we were drawing each other into scenes and having a great time. And then during one of our hiatuses, I got a gig over at Rocco's Modern Life that was just starting up by lying about the fact that I was a writer. And then as soon as I got the job and realized they were going to let us write stuff, my first call was to Dan. It's like, dude, you've got to get over here. They're letting us write and storyboard at the same time. You need to be here. And he came over and got a job right away. And I think about 2/3 of the way through the first season, they reshuffled the teams because I was originally working with Steve Hillenberg, the creator of Spongebob.
Yes.
And then they shuffled the teams up and put Dan and I together. And that's where we did our first work together. We wrote Wallaby of the West. And the first episode that we ever wrote a song together on. And it was pretty much at that moment that we decided we needed to create a show together so we could keep working together.
And we will get there. There'll be a nice lead in for that. I'm very excited to hear that because I know that said show was created 30 years ago, even though it didn't officially get its first season until 13 years later. We will get there. I'm curious about something. So this is similar to Rocco and also kind of mentioning your time with King of the Hill. But I saw, and you already kind of answered it. You mentioned Ferb. You were the first one to say Ferb, not me. I have not said Ferb. I have not said the words Phineas and Ferb together yet. But in King of the Hill, there's a Ferb's Taxis, and there was a Ferb the Contractor in Rocco's Modern Life. Was this intentional, and was this foreshadowing to the stuff that we all know today?
It became foreshadowing, but yeah, Dan and I started putting characters named Ferb in Rocco's Modern Life, and we used to have people working somewhere with their name tag said Ferb, and we had it as part of this big, long, rambly a guy giving them directions on the road trip episode. And we mentioned a guy named Ferb, and it was just fun because Ferb's our friend and we love him dearly, and it's a funny name. So we kept doing it. It was great because the censors kept thinking we were trying to slip some rude message in, and we're like, no rude message, just a guy's name. In fact, at one point I brought in his name tag. He's a set builder, worked on all the Star Trek stuff, and I had his name badge from Paramount. I'm like, look, here's his name badge. This is Ferb. Nothing dirty. And so when I got to King of the Hill and was doing designs on that, we used to put stuff in all the time. There's a guitar that on the headstock where it normally says Fender, it says Ferb. We had an ambulance that was Ferb equipped. We just kept putting it in, and it really started driving the King of the Hill guys crazy because they were the same thing. It's like, what does this mean? It's some hidden meaning, some hidden message. We're like, no, it isn't. And in fact, by that time, Ferb's wife, Melinda, was working on the show with me. I convinced her to come do animation with me. And I left the show I think after 4th season, and she said somewhere around 5th season, they actually said, all right, no more Ferb. We don't know what it is. We can't prove that it's anything, but you just can't do it anymore. So that was the end of the Ferbs until our show sold.
Indeed. So, all right. 1995. There are two names with an ampersand in the middle. Yeah, they ended up on summer vacation, but here they're a concept. Phineas and Ferb was born in 1995. And then
93.
one more time.
93.
93.
93.
Okay, so 32 years ago, Phineas and Ferb is first conceived. So my question, Swampy, is what prompted the original idea? And then 12 years later, it gets greenlit finally.
Yeah.
So what was the reaction then?
It literally started because Dan and I just loved working together. It was deliriously easy and funny and fun and rewarding. And so we thought, we'll create a show, we'll sell it. We thought we'd sell it to Nickelodeon because that's where we were working and they loved our work. And then we'd keep working together and life would be great. And then we didn't actually sell the show for, I think it ended up being almost 13 years. And during that time, we did not work together at all. I had ended up over in the UK running an animation studio over there. Dan had gone on to Family Guy and was working on that. But we kept pitching Phineas and Ferb. And it really just started as we need to have a show. What's it going to be? And the germ of the idea was us having kind of we weren't fully middle-aged, but it was a middle-aged guy rant about how kids today didn't get out and build things and do things like we did when we were kids. We used to build tree houses and go-karts, and we used to put on plays and concerts, and we did these big things. And kids nowadays were playing video games and watching movies on their VHS machines. And we're like, that's stupid. Go do things. Go do dangerous, dumb stuff. And I used to, modify bicycles to make them BMX bikes. And then we'd go jump things that we did a lot of dangerous stuff. And that was the idea for Phineas and Ferb, is two kids and what they get up to every day of that magical summer vacation, and what you would do if you weren't inhibited by money and the rules of physics and reality. And that was the basis of it.
And then when it finally, you sell it, what's the reaction when you're told that the first episode is ready? And I know you work on Roller Coaster. I remember watching Roller Coaster. I remember the Disney game that came with it where you build your own back in 2007, I think that was.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I was living in England when it sold. Dan, like I said, we kept pitching it independently. I was living in the UK. Dan was still out here, but we were around pitching other shows and working on other shows. So anytime somebody asked us if we had any shows we'd like to pitch, it was Phineas and Ferb. We just kept pitching it. Dan had pitched it to Disney a year before they picked it up, and they said no. They actually said, yeah, not really what we're looking for. Do you mind if we keep it? The pitch document. And we're like, no. And when they say that, that's usually just a polite way of them waiting until you leave the room to throw it in the trash can. But 9 months later, I think, they called Dan back and said, hey, that show that we weren't looking for things like that, now we are. So do you want to come make a pilot? And Dan called me. I was in England and said, hey, I think I just sold Phineas and Ferb. Do you want to come back and make it with me? And I'm like, yep. The sound you hear is me packing. And I came back and we started work on it. Actually, we began work on it when I was still living over there. He came over for a vacation. And I came over and visited him here. And we storyboarded it and wrote the theme song. And then he finished the storyboarding when he was on vacation in France and came back through England. And we sat down and did all our revisions and everything. And I got to design the Doofenshmirtz building and all that kind of weird stuff. And I came back to LA and they sold the show. Disney bought it. Actually, they made us do 3 episodes before they finally said their final yes.
Now, is one of those 3 episodes the Lost Media one that recently resurfaced?
Which one's that? Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it was the Nickelodeon version or maybe you guys haven't seen. So I saw it. It was on.
Well, there was a pilot animatic that we did that was basically just Dan talking his way through it, and then we put the voices on it and did some animation to it, and that was kind of the first little pilot piece that they used, because at that time they kind of had to sell the show to all of their global broadcasters. So Disney UK, Disney Europe, Disney India, Disney Middle East, Disney Asia all had to kind of buy off on it. And so they sent this animatic out to all the other markets to make sure that everybody wanted it. And that was the pitch that we used.
Okay.
And it was a little different than what finally went on the air, but not too much.
So what? There was some hair color differences, maybe a name difference.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the animation style wasn't what the final animation style was.
But it was, the character designs were all there. Like you said, there was some color changes that were made.
Yeah.
Once we saw the palette and we were looking at it against the background colors, we realized we had to make sure everybody read properly. And, that's where you nudge it around.
Yeah, and so Phineas and Ferb has been seen as of the summer, 12.6 billion hours watched, 665 million.
That's crazy.
Since 2007, 665 million, right? Since we got Disney Plus. And 2 things, kind of looking at some of your interviews that really stuck out to me. And when you think about Phineas and Ferb versus other shows, first, it was about, it's from you and Dan, I think, together. And you're talking about how Candace was kind of like Jeannie and Ferris Bueller in a way, which I can't unsee since seeing that. And the second, which I think, when you think about every Disney show, Cartoon Network, and Nick show, and for me, growing up and watching all these in the 2000s and comparing this, it's like you didn't want the friends just to be stupid or just kind of numbskull sidekicks. And I think it makes for every character having unique stories without having to play on common tropes, which of course makes it something where you can relate to any character. And it's not just always, you don't always need a Sheen or an AJ, or I guess Timmy himself is that, for example. But it's certainly helped to everyone's seen it, it seems. And
well, we wanted it to be different. And yeah, I was so happy that we ended up getting Jennifer Grey to come do a voice on the show, because her dad, Joel Grey, who was in Cabaret and Broadway legend, was our neighbor in Venice. And we got to know him, and he was kind of my son's surrogate grandfather for a while. So we got to know Jennifer pretty well, and she's lovely. And I told her, we literally based Candace on your character, and got her to come do a voice on the show, which was very, very cool. She's come back and done a few for us over the years. But it was wanting to figure out if we could do something differently than the way all the shows had been done, which was really relying on comedy that was based on either jerks or idiots. And we definitely knew we didn't want to portray the parents as jerks or idiots, because we had become parents. I'd been a parent for a long time. Dan had just become a parent. And we're like, I think parents are good people, nice folks, and supportive. We can still do that. And maybe we can still make a cool, funny, edgy show without leaning on those stereotypical type characters. And at that point, it sort of became a challenge. But it was funny watching the evolution of the writers. At one point, one of our writers actually said to us, it's like, God, do these characters, even have a personality? And we're like, yeah, they do. It's just not the one you've been writing on for the last 20 years. It's different. And almost every writer that's worked on the show at some point has come to us and said some version of, this is the hardest show I've ever had to write on. but it's also the most rewarding because when you get it right, it's not easy. You really have to work for it, but when you do it, it feels so good. And I think that really helped us stand out, you know, aside from the weird character designs, which Disney didn't like in the beginning. It helped it differentiate itself from what, you know, all the other stuff that was out there at the time.
And of course, you know, you talked a lot about England, your time there. The show was when you got the news, you were there. Is Ferb's dad British, and is that an homage to your time over there?
A little bit. I mean, both Dan and I love British humor, and I'd been over there for a long time and really got immersed in British comedy. And it served two purposes. It gave us a chance to slip our British humor stuff in, and it made it immediately clear, at least we thought it did, although some people still seem to be surprised by it. For us, it made it clear that Phineas and Ferb were stepbrothers, which was very important to us. And this way, at least you knew Ferb had come from a whole different place in a different world, but they were still brothers.
Certainly a very memorable pair of stepbrothers with fashion sense, as we learned through the seasons, that is second to none.
Yeah, definitely.
So, did you guys ever expect the show? And of course, any project you make, you expect success. It comes from the mind, and you bring it. Did you expect it to be as popular as it is, but close to 13 billion streaming hours, a couple of movies?
I'll have to say, Zach, we're pretty cocky, so we went into it pretty darn sure that we'd be able to get 2 seasons out of it. That was our whole expectation. We had for us at that time, that would have been a big thing. It's like we were pretty sure we could make a show that people would want to, you know, at least get 2 seasons out of, and we thought, wow, how cool that would be. And here we are. What, since 2007 when it first debuted, we're still making more. We took a little bit of a break, and then Disney called us back a few years ago and said, hey, would you guys like to make more of those? And we're like, sure, happy to, let's do it. And here we are. So yeah, we had no idea and no even dreams that it would ever be this kind of crazy big.
And now maybe it's a spoiler, but is there more coming beyond season 5, beyond the second half of season 5, or is this kind of or is that a?
Yeah, there, you know, we got an order for 2 more seasons, so we've got season 5 and 6. We're still, in fact, I just left a writers' meeting to come in to do this, where we're working on getting close to the end of writing for our second new season. And we've been working on ideas for more stuff and feature length stuff, and we'll see where it goes. We just keep writing as long as it feels good, and hopefully it connects with the audience enough that Disney will let us keep making them for a while.
Sure. I do have one more Phineas and Ferb question, then one more advice question, and then we will finish up. But I personally, so it took me a bit longer to finish the whole show. So it was only in the last 12 months that I saw Alka Files for the first time myself. And so, of course, that being way back then, I didn't know. And I know that, and you guys did a couple other shows that tried to do that. I know The Office with Schrute Farms tried something similar with Dwight and the whole farm episode. And so Alka Files to me is a song. That's something I sing almost on the daily. It is, I think it's catchy. I don't think you need a cool acronym for an organization in order for it to be catchy. So with the Alka Files, you know, is there any chance it comes back? And what was your favorite part of getting to write that episode as you guys wound down with the final?
You know, we did a few episodes with the thought in our head that if Disney ever wanted to do a spinoff, we had some formats that we thought these would be fun to, you know, because we wanted to do stuff that we would enjoy working on. So that was the idea for the Alka Files, and we really liked it. We just thought it was a fun way to play just with the agents and the agency and the idiocy of the agency, and the fact that animals or agents and all that dumb stuff. And we also got Doof. So it was great. So I certainly would not mind doing another Auka Files episode. And it's the kind of thing where I think if we look to the future and if like I said, if it connects with the audience and they ask us to make more, I would love to go back and look at some of those things that we did with the idea of possibly doing a spinoff and doing another episode of them because we thought they were fun. Like Doof 101 was another one. We thought that would be a really interesting way to play with an alternate, an alternate future for Doof. And yeah.
See, one more Phineas and Ferb. It's a hard subject to veer from. There's so much to it, but of course, Swampy, you are also the voice of Major Monogram. So, do you have a favorite quote that you've gotten to say, a favorite line you wrote for him, a favorite delivery, a favorite episode of his, a favorite Carl gag, or like something that really stands out from your time thus far? More to come of voicing him.
The great joy about Major Monogram is that he's sort of an idiot. Comes off very gruff, but deep down, he's a nice guy, just trying to be what he believes a boss should be.
But it's the voice came from me doing a bad impression of Walter Cronkite, who was the most trusted man in America when I was growing up. He was a newsman for CBS that I watched report the moon landing and the Kennedy assassination. He was like the guy. And so I just loved doing it. But it was one of those characters that started out, it was never going to be anything more than an expositionary device because Perry doesn't speak, to kind of let the audience know what Doof was doing. We never had any idea of doing anything else with it. And then our writers started doing things with Carl. And that all started literally with a stupid gag where there was one of those chyrons written on the bottom of the screen with the information. Mm-hmm. And Monogram just goes, "Carl, the writing with the 1000 on there, it's still on the screen. Thank you." We didn't hear Carl. It was just implying there was a guy there running the camera. And then people started writing more stuff for Doofenshmirtz, for Monogram that, like I said, we didn't ever think of it, but all of a sudden he had a history at the Academy, which to me is one of my favorite gags ever because it just confused Disney executives. They're like, "What is that? Are you going to explain it?" And we're like, "No, we're not. It's just the Academy." And I love that that's out there. I love the idea of Auka because there's a whole story of why we have that. And I don't know if you've heard it. The reason that we have Auka is because when I used to work in the computer industry, there used to be, when you would connect your computer to a scanner, a little thing would come up that would say, accessing Twain technology. And that was the way your computer accessed and spoke to your scanner. Mm-hmm. And I got to meet the guy who came up with that and got to ask him, I'm like, "Hey, what is Twain technology?" And he kind of smiled and said, "It stands for technology without an important name." And that just made me laugh. And I thought that was, and I always had that. So when we were trying to come up with a name for the organization, I thought, the organization without a cool acronym, AUKA. And it was just a dumb joke that stuck. But everything that I get to do with Monogram that we didn't conceive of originally with the character, to me, is joyous. And some of my favorite things have been when he's gotten to sing, because it's really hard for me to sing in that voice. And we've never let him finish a song, I don't think. And that's just been way too much fun.
Okay. And closing thoughts here, Swampy. What I do want to ask you, which is we ask all the guests as we wrap up. To those that want to do something similar to what you do, that want to work in the industry, what is your advice to them? Whether they're getting started, maybe they're trying to figure things out, but they have an interest. What do you think they should do?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you, this is the best job in the world. The only other one I might trade this for is race car driver. But I think I've reached the point at my age where my career as a professional Formula One or NASCAR driver is probably not going to happen. Unless there's somebody out there who hears this and wants to hire me, in which case call me, let's have a chat. But other than that, this is as good as it gets. And I've tried almost everything out there. The list of jobs I have tried is comically long. Some people think it's unbelievably long, but I wandered around doing dumb stuff for many years, and this is fabulous. So there, I can recommend it. But my biggest advice for people is, first of all, get educated, because so many people think, well, I can't draw. There's a ton of jobs that are integral to what we do that don't involve drawing. So learn all the different jobs that are out there. But the best advice is take any job in this industry that you can get. Anything. It doesn't matter what it is, because that's how you get to know the people that are making the hiring decisions. That's how you get to learn the different jobs in the industry. And that's how you're there when the opportunity comes to move into an area that you'd like to work in. So if you get a job making coffee, stacking this, anything, take that job. Don't hold out for the job you want. Just get there and get to know the people, because so many of the folks that have become our writers, our storyboard artists, our designers, our timers, all different facets of production, are people that we promoted from within, because we got to know them. We got to know they were funny. We got to know they were dedicated. We got to know they were hardworking. They were reliable. Any of those things that we needed to know to give them an opportunity to move up and do something else. Because we just, it's a great environment to work in. We just want to work with people we like and that we like spending time around. So meet those people. And the other thing I always tell folks is, don't worry about what school or university or college you go to. There's good ones, there's not so good, whatever it is. It's never made a difference to us about who we hire. Any animation class will give you access to the information you need, because the truth is, it's going to be the work you put into it that gives you the education. And if you went to, Bob's animation school in Podunk, Iowa, if you're dedicated and you do the work and you do the research, it's just as likely you will get as good an education and be just as qualified as somebody who went to CalArts. So that's it.
Degrees, preparation, attitude, and willingness. There's the big four right there. But Swampy, thank you for your time. Enjoyed talking P&F. Excited for part 2 of season 5, and looking forward to everything else that you get up to. And
for our younger viewers, coming up early next year, another show that I worked on called Hey AJ for Disney Junior is premiering. And it's really an amazing show with phenomenal music, and I can't wait for everybody to see that one. So keep an eye out for Hey AJ. I worked on that with Martellus Bennett, who's a former pro football player. He's got Super Bowl rings. Amazing dude who wrote these books for his daughter, and we turned it into a show, and hopefully it'll be out, I think, in January or February of next year on Disney Channel, Disney Junior.
Hey AJ, be on the lookout. Martellus Bennett and Swampy Marsh, the 1-2 duo that he didn't even have that chemistry with his quarterbacks, I'm sure, right? When he's catching passes.
Well, good stuff. Well, thanks for having me, Zach.
Thank you, Swampy, and we will see you all next time on Zach with an Itch.